Good evening. We welcome each and every one of you to our Southern Marin Town Hall. Our Southern Marin Town Hall on climate change and wildfires. We're going to get the town hall started in just a few moments. We want to first say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be able to join us. We have an all-star panel with us tonight. We are grateful that Southern Marin County Supervisor Kate Sears is with us. Say that a few times fast. We're grateful that we have renowned climate scientists with us tonight, coming to us all the way from Cornell University, Ben Holton. He's a proud California native, now Dean of Agriculture and Life Sciences out at Cornell. We want to say how much we appreciate that we have Chief Tubbs here with us tonight, as well as Chief Weber. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, we're going to have the Emergency Services Manager from the County of Marin, Chris Riley, with us tonight, who will be giving us a full briefing on alert and warnings, evacuation routes, and how you can become better prepared in time of emergency. We're going to get started here in just a few moments. We're broadcasting on 3 different mediums here this evening. We're going to be with you right here on Zoom. We're also going to be on Facebook Live, and we have several folks who are joining us via telephone here tonight. There's going to be 3 ways that we encourage you to please participate. We want this to be a lively, collaborative conversation. If you'd like to be able to submit a question, please send us a question via email. That email address is senator.mcguire@senate.ca.gov. Again, senator.mcguire@senate.ca.gov. We look forward to seeing your questions, your comments, your criticisms here this evening. If you'd like to be able to participate and you are live here on Zoom, look to the Q&A box and you can submit your question via the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. We'll be taking those questions and making sure that we get those questions asked to each of our participants. And if you're watching us via Facebook Live right now, you can also place your comment into the comment section on our Facebook Live broadcast. Again, we're going to get started here in just about 30 seconds. We're going to let folks continue to come into the room. We thank everybody for taking the time to be able to be with us tonight. And unfortunately, this could not come at a more critical time. The North Bay is being hit with another round of wildfires in Sonoma County and in Napa County. And we are so grateful to all of our firefighters and first responders coming to the aid of our neighbors in the north. We're going to get started here in just a few moments. Again, thank you all for joining us. My name is Mike McGuire, and I'm honored to be able to work here in Marin County as State Senator. Give us just a few more seconds, so we're going to get this event started. We want to welcome Councilwoman Fredericks, who's joining us via Zoom. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, we have Councilwoman Cox from Sausalito also with us on Zoom. Good evening, Councilwoman. Thank you for joining us. You may notice that you will be on mute here this evening. Again, we encourage you to be able to participate this evening. Join the conversation right now. Submit your questions or comments via the Q&A box right beneath the screen here. Submit your question via email, senator.mcguire@senate.ca.gov. All right, why don't we kick off here this evening? And again, welcome to our Southern Marin Town Hall on climate change and fire preparedness. My name is Mike McGuire, and I represent the Senate district that runs from the Golden Gate Bridge in Marin County all the way up to the Oregon border in Del Norte County. And let's face it, the impacts of these massive wildfires on North Bay communities, well, they have been devastating over the past 5 years. Each year, when we think that it couldn't get any worse, a larger, more destructive fire rages out of control. The largest, most destructive wildfires in our state's history have all taken place. They've all taken place in the past decade, but we've seen exponential growth of these mega fires, in particular, over the past 5 years. Since the early 70s, California wildfires have increased in size by 8 times that of just 45 years ago. The annual burned area has grown by nearly 500% in the West, and the length of fire season has increased by over 80 days here in the state of California. Our hottest days in the summer and the fall, well, our hottest days are up by up to 2.5 degrees compared to the early 70s. This new normal we're all faced with has several contributing factors. Number one, climate change. Climate change is real, and it's impacting our daily lives and the behavior of wildfires in this state. Number two, it's driven by the fact we're coming out of the largest drought in 1,200 years. Number three, these massive wildfires are being driven by the fact that we become really good at putting out fires over the last half century, and little has burned up until about 10 years ago. And there has not been a considered effort to remove dead and dying trees or dead brush in our forest lands and in our open spaces. That said, I promise you that times are changing and divisive action is being taken. Because of this, I'm a firm believer that we can adapt and we can advance data and science-driven solutions to help solve this pressing challenges. It's not just impacting us, but climate change will impact our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids. Tonight, we're bringing together local and statewide experts to be able to discuss how climate change is making our summer and fall temperatures hotter, wildfire season longer, and fires larger than ever before. And we're going to be talking about what the state and the county Marin is doing to continue its leadership in combating climate change and investing in wildfire prevention and response. And again, we want to say thank you to each of our panelists because they have been instrumental in making our community safer. So let's go over our agenda, if it's all right with each of you, and then would like to better turn it over to Supervisor Sears to provide some opening comments. We're going to have Supervisor Sears kick us off. Then we're going to turn it over to climate scientist. He is the Dean of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Cornell University. His name is Ben Holton. We'll hear from him here in just a few moments. We are so grateful that the Marin County Fire Chief, Jason Weber, the Southern Marin Fire Protection District Chief, Chris Tubbs, and of course, Chris Riley, who is the Emergency Service Manager for Marin County. They're here prepared to be able to give you an in-depth briefing on fire preparedness and emergency preparedness. The most important part of tonight, though, is hearing from each and every one of you. Again, if you'd like to be able to ask a question, if you'd like to provide a comment or a criticism, you can email us at senator.mcguire@senate.ca.gov. You can leave your question or comment in the Q&A box beneath your screen, or if you're with us on Facebook right now, you can leave a comment underneath the video and the broadcast in the comment section. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to turn it over to our first panelist tonight. Her name is Supervisor Kate Sears. I got to tell you, it's terrible that she's retiring. And I just want to say thank you, Supervisor Sears, for your amazing work, your commitment to this county and the North Bay, and in particular for your commitment to be able to combat climate change. Supervisor Sears will have 5 minutes. I'll give her a 30-second heads up. Supervisor Sears, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Senator. And I really appreciate your convening this forum. It couldn't be more timely on issues that I know are right at the forefront of all of our residents' concerns and worries. But I want to give us the big picture of 2020, which has really been throwing more challenges at us than we ever could have imagined. The COVID-19 pandemic, financial impacts to the economy and our county budget, racial justice and inequity issues. These seem like more challenges than we could handle all at once. But then came extreme heat, threatened power outages, wildfires burning everywhere, smoky, unhealthy air, and the dark orange apocalyptic skies of September 9. While COVID-19 has shined a strong light on existing inequities of age, health, race, and financial capacity, extreme heat and wildfires are making apparent the reality of climate change. COVID-19 has caused many of us to re-examine how we live in the world, to question the noise and frenetic pace of life when we were not sheltering in place, to admit our failure to address ongoing racial and social inequities, and as county government, to take action to support those most affected by the pandemic and its economic impacts. Climate change and the heat, drought, wildfires, and sea level rise it brings will require us to rethink virtually every aspect of daily life. How and where homes are built, how power grids are designed, how to dramatically reduce our carbon footprint, and how we as individuals plan for the future with the collective good in mind. Two things are important to the rethinking we must do as a result of both climate change and of COVID-19. The first is neighborhood awareness, individual preparedness, and mutual support. And the second is collaborative problem solving and innovation. Neighborhood awareness, individual preparedness, and mutual support is how we make ourselves and our communities stronger and more resilient, more able to navigate the changing world we live in. I want to give you two examples that you'll hear more about this evening from Chief Tubbs, about the kind of individual action and neighborhood preparedness the county has been promoting, particularly since the fires of 2017. You probably are already aware of both of them. The first is the Firewise USA program for Fire Safe Marin, which provides resources to help homeowners learn how to adapt to living with wildfire, while encouraging and empowering neighbors to work together to take action now to reduce their wildfire risk and prevent losses. There are now 63 Firewise communities in Marin. This is a tremendous accomplishment in just a few years. The second example is the Tam Valley Neighborhood Response Group, or NRG network, which provides the framework for residents to get to know one another, identifying those with special skills who can be invaluable during an event and those who may need special assistance. By promoting the social cohesion of neighbors and creating bonds in advance of a disaster, NRGs ensure that no one is left out in an emergency. These are just examples of the ways in which we prepare for the future with the common good in mind. And then there's collaborative problem solving and innovation. In 2017, the county launched the Drawdown Marin initiative to dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions that fuel climate change. Prevention of catastrophic wildfire and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions share a common need to develop an economic sector and options for best managing the increasing amounts of biomass being generated in Marin as homeowners and land managers cut down vegetation to reduce fire fuel load. A study proposed by one of the collaborative working groups in our Drawdown Marin initiative will show how Marin biomass can be managed more sustainably, consistent with sound fire management practices and carbon emission reduction and sequestration goals. The study will identify viable options for converting biomass into various end products: mulch, compost, anaerobic digesters that produce renewable natural gas, biopower that generates electricity, gasification that creates biochar and renewable hydrogen, and wood products. This is the kind of collaborative and innovative thinking that will help us address climate change and wildfire threats to our communities.
30 seconds.
We have a lot of work to do to prepare ourselves for wildfires and for climate change. But with the leadership and guidance of the participants in tonight's panel, with the engagement of residents like you who have tuned in tonight and are asking all the right questions, and with a firm focus on community and the common good, I'm confident we can meet any challenge. Thank you.
Supervisor Sears, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Supervisor Sears is going to be sticking around here and going to be taking your questions and comments here in just a few moments. We now would like to be able to turn the floor over to Ben Holton. Ben is the Dean of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Cornell University, but he's a California kid. He grew up here. He most recently was teaching and a leading climate scientist at UC Davis. He is always going to be a proud Aggie. We're going to now turn the floor over to Ben. He's going to be talking to us about climate change on California's wildfires. Mr. Holton, the floor is yours, and we welcome you to the forum.
Thanks so much, Senator. Real privilege to have this opportunity. And first of all, my heart goes out to all of you who are suffering through these catastrophic wildfires. And I'm going to give you a real quick summary of what I'm going to talk about. Number one, it's bad. Number two, it's getting worse. And number three, we can solve it. And what I'm talking about is the challenge of climate and climate change. So let me break that down into now three basic elements. A little background on myself. I've been studying the global climate system for a couple decades. I've published over 134 scientific works. I got my PhD at Princeton. I spent time at Stanford, and I was a professor at UC Davis for about 15 years, and I continue to do active research in this arena. Today, I'm working a lot with farmers and ranchers all around the Central Valley on carbon-smart, climate-smart agricultural approaches. So with that knowledge, one thing I can say is that first, we have dangerously interfered with the global climate system. And what that means is that our continued reliance on fossil fuels and the burning of carbon, which forms carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, is unequivocally warming the climate. We're at the point now where we are seeing catastrophes that are climate related all over the planet, whether it's people in India who are experiencing extreme heat waves like never before, people in sub-Saharan Africa who are trying to grow food and can no longer predict the weather and the precipitation patterns to know when to plant their food. I spent a lot of time there. Or it's right in our living rooms in California. Climate change is here, and it reveals itself in extremes. So the second point would be, to what extent is the wildfire activity in California driven by climate change versus biomass accumulation? And we already heard from the senator that there's a bit of both. And the scientific consensus on this problem has really grown in sophistication to the point now we can say with a high degree of confidence that at least half of the spread or intensification of wildfire is driven by biomass accumulation, and the other half is being driven by climate. And those two work together. They form a synergy, which is now giving rise to this incredible tinderbox situation that we find ourselves in. Final point, which we can talk much more about today, and this is where I get most excited and I spend the vast majority of my time. How do we solve this challenge? Well, first, we will hear all about different ways we can manage our forests, and there's experts here on this panel. I'm excited to hear about some of the activities with forest management. We have to think locally. We also have to do it in a way that drives carbon benefits for our soil and our ecosystems, and ultimately for California, because we have climate goals that we need to meet. Finally, we need global coordination, things like the Paris Agreement, because without that, our emissions in California are only 2% of the total. And so we have to find ways to collaborate internationally to really get greenhouse gases down. So we have a world for our kids, so we have businesses in the future, and we have an economy that is robust and sustainable.
Joel, thank you so much. And we got a lot of questions coming in from Ben tonight on all issues of climate change. We're going to be getting to your questions here shortly. Again, we have been taking questions via the Q&A box, the question and answer box beneath this screen. Make sure you ask your questions there. You can also email us, senator.mcguire@senate.ca.gov. This is our Southern Marin Town Hall on climate and wildfire preparedness. We're now going to be turning it over to the chief of Marin County Fire. His name is Jason Weber. We're grateful for his hard work. He is going to be talking on all issues about what he has seen in his career and how fires have grown throughout his career. He's also going to be talking about how they're burning longer and how we're seeing additional impacts to property. And then he's going to be talking about local solutions that he and other boards and city councils and members of boards of supervisors have been driving to be able to make Marin County a safer place. Without further ado, we're going to turn it over to Chief Weber from Marin County Fire.
Thank you, Senator McGuire. And I always say I want to bottle your energy and take it. You've been a catalyst for legislation that the fire service has desperately needed, and you're moving the dial, and it's much appreciated. The local level, Supervisor Sears, your commitment to the climate and to fire prevention has been paramount, and I appreciate both of your support as we move forward in this. As the senator was saying, fires are larger, they burn longer, destroy more property, kill more people than ever before. The fire season, if we can even call it that anymore, is 80 plus days longer than it was in the 1970s. As you heard from Ben and others, what's the cause? Well, climate change is a part of that. The other thing is the 1935 10 a.m. policy that said, we're going to start suppressing all fire and not let fire be a part of the natural ecosystem that it historically had always been. And we've changed and modified our forests, and then we've moved into them, into the wildland-urban interface, and really we humans have created this, and it's going to be our job to work collectively together to get out of this problem. And it's not something we're going to solve overnight. There isn't a silver bullet. The approach has to be holistic. It's going to take all of us working together, from state and local legislators to the fire departments to our climate experts, and then most importantly, all of you that are watching tonight. And thank you for tuning in. You are probably the most important part of this conversation. We have to have all of you on board. Chief Tubbs and I both were up in Santa Rosa. I was up there Sunday night. It just reinforced everything we're doing here and the importance of it. We need to double down on these things. When I started here 25 years ago, plus as a seasonal firefighter, you could set your watch. Fire season started July 1st. We'd be back in school right after Halloween, October 31st. We have our seasonal firefighters on board now until December. It's not sustainable, and we've got to redirect a lot of our energy into preventing these issues and not just responding to them. And that's a lot of what's happening in the work we're doing. In order to deal with these challenges, as I mentioned, we must come together. It's got to be a holistic approach. So that's from the house out, right? Everything from hardening your structure, which Chief Tubbs is going to talk about, creating defensible space. The junipers of the 80s have to go. They were great during a drought. It was green, but I watched with explosive power the other night, junipers and the subsequent ember showers take out home after home and block roadways and access that compromises evacuation routes. Homes need to be hardened so they can be tolerant of an ember shower and not ignite. We have a lot of work to do in that arena. The goals of any program, and I think what we base the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority on are key here. We must get people out alive. We've got to protect their home, which is their greatest asset. And then we have to create a landscape that is tolerant of low intensity fire, because that's what we need to be successful, is that lower intensity fire and a lot more of it in a controlled environment. What types of vegetation management programs are available to you here in Marin County? Well, we are a resource for you in the fire service. We want to send our evaluators out. We don't want to call them inspectors. We want to help educate you. Minor and low cost things you can do have amazing impact. Cleaning your gutters of dry and dead material, cleaning up dead vegetation around the house, plant choices around the structure, where they're at, how they're located. I think some people will spend tens of thousands of dollars on tree removal when it can be a much simpler issue with limbing those trees up, managing them, and then reducing that ladder fuel that often drives the fire from the ground into the trees and the canopy and spreads. We have chipper days available that you can sign up for through Fire Safe Marin that's partnered with Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. Supervisor Sears mentioned the great work around our Firewise communities. There's some questions about volunteerism. There's a ton of work to do in this arena, and we need your support in making these Firewise communities successful. Community organizing around Fire Safe Marin and public education and control burning. Evacuation maps are available on our websites. Tasks often seem overwhelming, and then we need you to support your neighbors. We have a lot of seniors and those with access and functional needs. They're going to need help in an evacuation, and Chris Riley is going to talk about that. Again, I'll thank the Senator for having us here tonight, and we look forward to the questions and conversation.
Chief, thank you so much. We're grateful for your leadership. And I got to say, Marin County, when there are challenges north of us in Sonoma County, they come a-running. And in fact, that first night they sent 6 engines up to be able to assist along with additional management personnel. And we cannot say thank you enough to Chief Weber and to Chief Tubbs. Chief Tubbs, of course, is the chief of the Southern Marin Fire Protection District. Chief Tubbs is going to be talking to us tonight about how communities can become better prepared. What are those best tools to be able to protect our homes and neighborhoods from the risk of wildfire? Chief Tubbs, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, and I'll give you a 30-second prompt.
Thank you, Senator. And again, I would also echo Chief Weber's comments with regards to yours and Supervisor Sears' leadership. I'd also recognize both our councils and our local boards as well, and the leadership that they show that allow us to do a lot of the work that we're doing. So we're very, very grateful for all of you who are helping lead this initiative. You know, what communities can do to be better prepared really starts with the individual, and at times this can seem rather overwhelming, as Jason sort of referred to. And I like to sort of think about it in terms of a little adage I gave my kids when they were younger. You know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It can be very, very overwhelming, but just taking even one step at a time, that one small action can make a difference. But there are 7 things that I would like to just sort of highlight for folks. Again, it starts with the individual. The first thing that you can do is sign up for Alert Marin and Nixle. Public notifications is how you're going to be informed. You're going to hear about what the emergency is, where it is located, where you may be evacuated or moved to. So having that in your arsenal is very, very critical. The second thing is, as you've heard before tonight, is evacuations. But knowing 2 ways out of your home, 2 routes, and then 2 methods. You may not be able to get out by your vehicle. One of the things that I noticed when I was up in Sonoma on Monday was how many roads were blocked by trees and power lines. And so knowing if you have to move from your car to foot traffic, being ready to do that, being prepared is really important. Third, take steps to harden your home and create defensible space around your home using recommended vegetation management practices. A really great resource for that is your local fire department or Fire Safe Marin, tremendous agency, a lot of great information on their site. As Supervisor Sears noted, the next item is know your neighbors. It's really important to support one another. That has been reinforced, certainly to me, in the 2017 fires and on. Chief Welch, who's my deputy chief, lost his home in 2017. And he spent that evening going from house to house, evacuating his neighbors, looking out for his neighbors. Many of those people didn't even know their houses were on fire. So looking out for each other is a really important thing. Preparedness is a group activity. Join an NRG, a neighborhood response group. This is a more formalized way of taking care of each other. Next, start a Firewise community. Every local fire department in Marin County has and supports this program. It's a great way to take actionable steps as a small community towards creating defensible space and hardening your homes. And finally, maybe most importantly, remain actively aware. Situational awareness is really key. Use all of your senses. And with that, I'm done.
Chief Chops, thank you so much. Really good advice to be able to save lives, and in particular, making sure that we're working with our neighbors, because when neighborhoods are safe, families are going to be safe. We appreciate that, Chief Chops, for your commitment. We're going to be taking your questions in just a few moments. We have several that have come in via the Q&A box right beneath us. We have dozens of questions that are coming in right now at senator.mcguire@senate.ca.gov. We'll get to them shortly. But first, we need to be able to hear from Chris Riley. Chris Riley is the fantastic emergency services manager from the county of Marin. He's going to be talking to us what evacuations look like in this era of coronavirus. He's going to discuss the alert and warning system. He's going to be introducing high-low sirens and what those mean and why they're so important. And of course, defining what secondary systems look like as well here in Marin County. So without further ado, let's turn it over to Mr. Riley. Mr. Riley, thank you for your hard work. You have 5 minutes and I'll give you a 30-second prompt.
Senator McGuire, thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to talk about these very important issues. Yes, I'd like to talk about 3 areas of responsibility that we have in the Office of Emergency Services. You mentioned them. The first one is evacuations and mass care and shelter. So yes, mass care and sheltering evacuations in light of COVID has been very challenging. First, it's important to note that when you hear that you receive a warning through Alert Marin, that means it's going to be time very soon to evacuate. So you probably have 2 hours or less to get ready. If you get an order through Alert Marin, then that means it's time to go now. And what you want to do is know your evacuation routes, plan them in advance so that you know how to do it when the real disaster happens. Many evacuation routes are now available on your local fire department website and other resources. Sheltering in light of COVID. So it's been very challenging. Of course, we have to follow the public health officer's orders to make sure that the shelter workers and all the evacuees are safe in the various types of sheltering options that we have. One of the things that we've done is we've identified temporary evacuation points. So when you receive that order to go, you follow your evacuation route, you come down to the temporary evacuation point where we can organize the number of evacuees and decide the safest and the quickest way to shelter them. Again, during COVID, we've seen the development of some new opportunities. One of them is the state has actually come through and the Department of Social Services provides hotel vouchers. That way we can isolate families, we can isolate small cohorts, groups to be safe in isolation in hotel rooms to shelter if that shelter is needed. The other option that we have is sheltering in larger facilities that provide more space so that we can follow the appropriate social distancing, all of the other personal protective equipment and disinfectant types of procedures to make sure that everybody's safe. So it's been very challenging, but we have developed the plans and we feel that we're ready in case we have to do that. Second area of responsibility I want to talk about quickly is alert and warning. I know often there's a lot of confusion about the difference between Alert Marin and Nixle and social media, and which one should I sign up for, which one's more important. They're all good tools, and we have many tools in our arsenal of alert notification and public information. The key difference is that we use Alert Marin when we want you to take action. So you sign up at alertmarin.org, you give us your mobile number, you give us your email. We use that tool, we geolocate warnings based on just the location that is in danger. And we tell you to either that it's a warning or it's an order and it's time to go. Nixle is used more for follow-up information. It's still a really important tool. So we want you to text your zip code to 888777. And that way we can send follow-up information. That's the difference in how we use those. And then just quickly, there's other tools that we use for notifications. We use wireless emergency alerts, also known as Amber Alerts, which provides a wide area alerting, comes across your cell phone in the event that we need to warn you of a disaster in a large area. We also have at our disposal emergency alert system, which really is only used in a very large area disaster because it goes out to the broader media market. So that means it's on all of the television channels, it's on all across the radios. So we only use that in a very, very large event. Finally, something new that we're doing is the high-low siren. You can actually watch a video on the Marin Sheriff Twitter feed that gives you an example of what that sounds like. If you hear a law enforcement officer driving through your neighborhood with the high-low siren, that means it's time to go too. It's similar to an order, so it's time to evacuate. And just quickly, one thing that we're working on is we're testing the use of weather radios also for notifications for all types of hazards. Finally, I just want to mention a few preparedness items. Again, a reminder just to sign up for alerts at Alert Marin and through Nixle. Have a go bag. There's some good information on the FEMA websites and others about what should go in that go bag. Practice an evacuation. Have a communication plan with your family so you can stay in touch with them. And one final nugget that we learned from 2017 fires is people should review their homeowner's insurance to make sure that they're adequately insured in the event of a disaster. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is Chris Riley. Chris Riley is the Emergency Services Manager for the County of Marin. Thank you so much. Again, wonderful advice. And it is now time to be able to turn to the most important part of tonight's town hall, and that's hearing from each of you. We want to say thank you for contacting us and keep those questions and those comments coming. You can ask your question or comment in the Q&A box right beneath us. You can send in your questions or comments to senator.mcguire@senate.ca.gov. Or, of course, if you're watching us on Facebook, and whether it's the Southern Marin Fire Protection District or our Facebook page, simply put a question into the comment section and we'll get back to you here with your comment live here on the town hall. All right, a lot of questions coming in right now for the good doctor, Dr. Holton from Cornell. So let's get right to it. Talking about issues of climate change, Carrie writes in and says, Ben, why all of a sudden are we seeing a surge in catastrophic wildfires in our state and region? So Ben, gonna have you take yourself off mute. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. It really does seem it's been expedited, this timeline of these catastrophic fires. So why all of a sudden? Have at it, please.
Yeah, happy to address that question briefly here. You know, first of all, we are aware, as we've discussed, that there has been an accumulation of biomass and some significant droughts that the senator discussed. Some mega droughts we may be entering, which have caused or basically enabled the disruption of our forest vegetation. And so we're seeing that there's, you know, about 130, 150, depending how you count, dead trees and dead vegetation around California. You also have the pine beetle, which kind of comes in. It's like the nail in the coffin on these trees. So we have standing timber that is now being progressively dried out through extreme heat events and changes in precipitation and what we call whiplash events, where we're going from a very unpredictable state of a flood to then a drought to then a flood, all very quickly. And so this stresses out our vegetation. As a result, climate change is now causing a massive uptick in wildfire severity and spread. I would also say that if you look at the projections scientists have been making for decades. This is very consistent with what we thought would be started to see happen, but it is happening at a rate that is even alarming to the scientific community, even though we were predicting these kind of events. So it's really time, I think the points that were raised before, we have to collaborate, cooperate, and communicate. This is a real issue facing us today, and we can take some local action to help mitigate against the risk of wildfire intensity and spread, but we have to coordinate more broadly to stop the challenge its tracks.
Absolutely appreciate that, Mr. Holton. So, but let's talk about the whole issue of an expedited timeline. It really seems, especially over these last 5 years, the large fires have grown exponentially. So what is that tipping point? What brought us to this point where we're here today, where we're going to burn 4 million acres in the state of California?
Well, the fact that we're starting to see 4 million acres and that it is coincident with the extreme heat events is completely consistent with a climate signal. Now, the forest vegetation is poised to erupt in a wildfire because of a lot of what has happened over the past 100 years. So we have to get back to things like cultural burning. Native Americans knew how to burn and manage ecosystems in a way that allowed the fire to be a part of nature. But ultimately, it is the trigger that we're seeing of extreme heat events that are now starting to become much more common in California. And that is what's in the driver's seat in terms of the most recent wildfires we're seeing.
Thank you so much. That's Dr. Holton from Cornell University. We have a lot more coming in for Ben in just a few moments, but now we're going to turn our attention to the Southern Marin Fire Protection District. This next question is coming in from Kristen. Kristen, Chief Tubbs asks, what neighborhoods in Southern Marin are the most vulnerable to fire? What neighborhoods in Southern Marin are the most vulnerable to fire? Chief Tubbs, Southern Marin Fire Protection District.
Yeah, so throughout the district, we have set boundaries around what we call the wildland urban interface, and those are the areas that are most risk for us. So certainly, if we look at Sausalito, those areas that are up in the highlands, border up against the GGNRA, where we've got a lot of fuel back behind it. Those are some of the areas that give us the most concern. Homestead, Tam Valley as well. Really throughout the district, a lot of the areas are really at risk, and it's really sort of hard to say, what areas are safe and what areas are not. They're all at risk.
So let's talk about that, Chief Tubbs. Rena writes in, how you just mentioned Tam Valley. Chief Tubbs in the Fire Protection District oversees Tam Valley. So Rena writes in, how is Tam Valley preparing for wildland fire?
Well, right now, and Supervisor Sears mentioned this earlier, we have a tremendous amount of energy around neighborhood response groups underway. It's accelerated to the point that they've reached out to the fire department and asked for some assistance in providing some oversight. This group has grown immensely. And as I mentioned before, it starts with individual preparation. And so this is one of the ways in which Tam Valley has been preparing. In addition, the Tam Valley Community Service District has been doing a lot of vegetation work long before this was sort of a popular thing. So they've been leading those efforts. So those are just two examples of some of the things that are going on in Tam Valley.
Thank you. That's Chief Tubbs from the Southern Marin Fire Protection District. We're taking your questions, your comments tonight. Senator.McGuire@senate.ca.gov. Let's go to our next question. This is going to be going to Jason Weber. He's the Chief of Marin County Fire. Chief, Jason writes in, does the county have plans to increase the number of firefighters within the county? If so, what is the plan and increase, and how would it be funded? Chief Weber, Marin County Fire.
So good question. As I mentioned before, we are in an unsustainable path and challenged. When I started, we had about 35 seasonal firefighters. We now have 100 with the support of the Board of Supervisors. We've expanded, added 2 TAM fire crews to support both the pre-fire work, but as well as being available to respond to fires and assist with the control measures. Very timely question that we have just received word. We were awarded a FEMA grant for $4.3 million to add 6 additional full-time staff. That will be going to the Board of Supervisors for consideration Tuesday. And that will help us manage more seasonal firefighters because we need that supervision level. But again, a lot of this has to do, we as a community also made a $20 million investment in the pre-fire work, which is so important. I think we're very fortunate in Marin that we have very talented, well-staffed, well-equipped fire stations year-round. But they're there to respond to the fire. And our communities collectively made a large investment on all that work before the fire starts with the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. So a lot is happening in that arena. And, I think it'll put us on a more sustainable path.
Thank you so much. That's Chief Weber, Chief of Marin County Fire. We're now going to go to Chief Tubbs, then we're going to turn it back over to our climate scientist, Ben Holton. Chief Tubbs, this next question is coming in from Mill Valley. This is coming in from Gretel. Gretel asks, what are the top 3 action items and how are we as Mill Valley residents involved?
Was there some specificity with regards to the top 3 actions with regard to what?
I think she's talking about fire preparedness and getting the community ready to go when it comes to fire.
Yeah, so I think, again, I would come back to the things that we have talked about before already. So evacuations, of course, is a very big issue in our communities in the Southern Marin area. We've done work with regards to setting up, these evacuation maps. This is one of the things the community has asked for. We're doing a lot of community outreach. We have a lot of groups that get requests into us and say, we'd really like to meet to really understand not only the evacuation route, but what is the plan? What is going to happen when a fire occurs? So that's probably one of the big things. The second thing is, as Jason mentioned, the work that we're doing on the preventative side with Measure C funds. And that starts with defensible space inspectors getting out and identifying where those risks and hazards are so we can take the funding that we have for moving the biomass and apply that where our risks are the greatest. And then lastly, it's in the public notification and sort of that alerting area that I talked about. If you don't know what's going on, then it's that information, where to evacuate and all that is not going to be helpful. So we're really pushing, again, the importance of public notifications and signing up for those systems. So
before we leave Mill Valley, Chief, let's talk about evacuating out of Mill Valley. There's only one way in, one way out, essentially the main course, and then you got 101. So we have received a lot of questions here tonight from Mill Valley residents talking about what happens if, everybody knock on wood, if the big one hits, a large wildfire in Mill Valley, what's the plan in regards to evacuating and especially getting out early? Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah. So you're exactly right. The first key element to that is getting out early, and that begins with notification. So these don't happen in a vacuum. We have a lot of good systems that monitor the activity in our area. So up on Mount Tam, as a lot of folks probably know, we have very sophisticated fire cams with software that alert us to these issues as they're beginning, so we can get the notifications out early. The second piece is that we've identified community refuge areas. So many years ago, the concept was that everybody has to get on the 101 corridor and get out. We realize that our infrastructure can't support that, so we have to be more strategic. So that's where we've brought in community refuge areas. And the fires that we've seen since 2017 have reinforced the strategy, which is what we need to really do is move you from an unsafe place to a safe place. And that may be temporary. That might be the golf course, it might be a park, it might be a parking lot. And we stage you there until we decide to move you somewhere else. All those decisions are made on the ground at the time. And then lastly, it's just the important coordination that goes on between the police department, the fire department, Marin, OES, and then of course our community groups, our NRGs, and those folks all working together.
Thank you so much, Chief Tubbs, Southern Marin Fire Protection District, talking about evacuation routes and strategies if and when we see a large wildfire in and around Mill Valley. We're now going to be going to our climate scientist, Dr. Holton. Dr. Holton, this next question comes in from Robert Hines. Robert says, weather is different every year. How long does it take for changes in the weather to be considered a change in the climate?
So that's a terrific question, and weather does change every year. It gets cooler every night. I mean, to say that tonight, or it will get cooler, I mean, obviously it will get cooler when we go to bed. Okay, so let's just not get into that kind of silly way of thinking about this challenge. Scientifically, we're not willing as a scientific community to start talking about climate as a changing system for at least a decade. And one point I want to make is real clear. It can appear as if climate change just suddenly came out of some idea, maybe in the past couple decades, but the climate science that we're using today was derived from the 1800s, going back to famous people like Fourier and Tyndall and Foote and Arrhenius. They laid the framework for greenhouse gases causing a heating of the planet. And then there was debate, because scientists love nothing more than to debate. Not like what maybe we saw last night, like debate through the peer-reviewed literature. And let me tell you one thing, to get scientists to agree on a common notion took 150 plus years for us to finally say, yes, we have high confidence. In fact, it's unequivocal that greenhouse gases are the major determinant of the changes in climate. So short answer is weather changes daily, we have seasons, and it can change annually. But when you start seeing decadal patterns, you start knowing that there's a change in the climate system. And the patterns we're seeing now can be traced back to about the Industrial Revolution. That's when we've been tracking the climate changes that we're seeing today.
And Ben, why don't you talk about that 2.5 degree warming? What we've heard Governor Newsom say time and time again, our hots are getting hotter. And in fact, when we take a look at our fall and our summer temperatures, it's true, up to 2.5 degrees. So talk about that and how that relates to fire behavior and activity.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's tried to start a fire with wet wood on a cold day knows it doesn't work well. Okay, so it's pretty simple from that level, that if you have dry tinder and it's hot, it's much more flammable. And so the spread of wildfire increases. This doesn't mean that people can't go and ignite a fire. But in fact, when you look at the science, it's quite clear. The biggest wildfires we're seeing in the Western United States are lightning driven. Moreover, the biggest fires are occurring in areas that have not been experiencing massive suppression activities. Now that's for the Western United States. It doesn't mean, I am not saying that fire suppression is not a really important factor. It is an important factor in California. We have to clear out the biomass and do it in a very healthy way and return to a normal regime. But it is critical to think about the problem kind of in that way.
Thank you so much. And you believe we're at about 2.5 degrees?
So I would say this in terms of the threshold, the Paris Climate Agreement is always talked about in Celsius, and there we're trying to hold the world's temperature to avoid anything above 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius of warming from the pre-industrial level. In California, if we talk in Fahrenheit, yes, we are starting to see that California's climate is approximately 2 degrees Fahrenheit on average, maybe up to 4 degrees in some years, which is really, a few years ago, we were 4 degrees above the ambient result, the background record. So it's starting to happen. This is how climate change works. It makes the extremes more extreme. We start to lose the cold days, and we start to see the nighttime temperatures go up and the daytime extremes get really intense.
Thank you so much. That's Ben Holton. Ben Holton is the Dean of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Cornell University and one of the best climate scientists here in the nation. We're now going to turn our attention to Chief Weber from Marin County Fire. Chief, there has been, since 2017, so much discussion about eucalyptus and juniper. Not the planet, rip it out, get rid of it, and junk that juniper. We're getting a lot of questions tonight. This one is coming in from Bob Corman. So if you want us to junk our juniper, what types of yard plants should we be planting for fire safety?
Great question. Thank you, Bob. And we have resources available to you. One of them is Fire Safe Marin's website. We have a plant list there. We also have the Master Gardeners in Marin, which are a great resource for native plants that are drought tolerant, that are also sustainable in a fire environment. Then we have the resources of the fire department that can help tell you where are those best planted. And not all plants are bad. Having rosemary at your house for cooking is wonderful. Just don't put it next to the plate glass window adjacent to the house. It needs to be 20 feet from the house. And so plant choice is helpful with the lists we have and the Master Gardeners. Location, we can certainly provide those resources at the fire department. And then there was another question on the live chat about soil erosion afterwards. Master gardeners is another good choice. So this may be something you do over several years and you take it down, but you can start with clearing the dead material out and lightening the fuel load, and then take it down eventually to replacing that plant species. And a lot of our homes are on hillside communities. Soil erosion is a real issue. We don't ask that you denude your landscape. Most mature trees, if there's canopy break, don't need to come out. They need to be maintained. We can also help you with making those choices. So you're spending the right money in the right places and don't cause additional issues.
Thank you so much, Chief Weber. Chief, we're going to stick with you. Let's talk about Mount Tam for a moment. So Denise asks on the Zoom Q&A chat, what are wildfire evacuation plans for a typical weekend day in and around Mount Tam when there are thousands of visitors in the area who will not be linked to Alert Marin? So let's talk about that. You got a lot of folks coming from across the bay, jumping on Mount Tam to ride their bikes, to be able to hike. How do you get them off if there's a wildfire? Chief Weber.
So great question. We had these considerations when we did the fire out in the national park just a month plus ago. We can use tools like the wireless emergency alert system, which is not geospecific. It's not specific to a cell phone. It'll hit all cell phones that are in that broadcast area. We'll use aircraft with a bullhorn announcement, either from the sheriff's office or CHP. And we'll use the rangers that are on the mountain to evacuate people and clear the trails, from the most threatened area out from there. So that's the plan we'll use. And then again, to Chief Tubbs' point, we want to move you from an area of danger to somewhere safer. May not be comfortable and you may not be happy, but you'll survive. And that's a lot of times just our goal, is to move people from an area of greater danger to one of less danger.
Thank you so much. That's Chief Weber, Marin County Fire. We're now going to be turning it over to Chief Tubbs. Chief Tubbs, a lot of questions coming into you via the Zoom Q&A chat for folks who live in Tam Valley. So this is coming in for Michael. Michael represents several questions. I live in Tam Valley and very concerned about exit routes. If there were to be a swift moving fire with little or no notice to evacuate, is there a plan for dealing with evacuation traffic on the shoreline? Chief Tubbs.
Yeah, I think, again, it's all going to depend on the location of the fire and all of those things around fire behavior, but we will be utilizing our fire personnel, we'll be utilizing our law enforcement personnel to determine the most safest route out of there. Where is an area that we can take them to, at least temporarily, that is safe. So it's based on the event, but we'll use our resources of communication and notification to get people from an unsafe place to a safe place.
Chief, we're going to stick with you, and then we're going to also turn this over to Chief Weber from Marin County Fire. All right, Chiefs, a lot of questions tonight about neighbors. So we're going to take Valerie's question coming in. Valerie says, is there any mechanism for me to get my neighbor to cut down his huge dense grove of black acacia on his property? It's definitely a huge fuel source. We've heard about junipers. We've heard about eucalyptus tonight, all on neighbor's land, overgrown land with broom as well. So Chief, what do you do if your neighbor doesn't give a flip, lets the land overgrow? What's the action that can be taken?
So if you want me to take that, so it's challenging. I have a neighbor with eucalyptus trees and acacia right behind me. And so I am experiencing this personally. The law stops at the fence line, but we are here to help you work with your neighbors to make choices. Sometimes it could be a financial challenge or a physical challenge for the removal. We're happy to start engaging in those conversations if if it is a true threat to your property. And if it's a true threat to their property by law, there has to be some mitigation. So in these cases, we try not to get in neighborhood fights, but if you've exhausted all logical options, we are happy to help initiate conversations and move the needle and make improvements any way we can. And we have grant dollars offered through MWPA now, if that's the obstacle. And if nothing else, Chief Tubbs is certainly charming, and I think he can help negotiate between neighbors.
There we go. Chief Tubbs is living the dream right there with that issue. Thank you, Chief Weber. So we're going to stick with Chief Tubbs. There's a lot of conversation about threshold when it comes to weed abatement and abatement orders. When do you pull the trigger, Chief Tubbs, for abatement of fire hazard on private property? How does that work? Where is the threshold?
Yeah, so we have to evaluate each of those individually. Chief Weber touched a little bit on that, and we see this, manifest in a variety of ways. We see it with abandoned property, and folks who live out of state. And so there are initially certain legal processes that we'll have to go through. We have to identify who the property owner is. We have to try and reach out to that property owner and see if we can get them to abate it. We have to determine the level of that hazard and that risk. What time of the year is it? What is the actual scale of the threat? But as Chief Weber noted, if we have to take intervening actions, then there are things that we can do to accommodate that. And some of that can include, we actually go in on the property, we abate the hazard, and then we put a lien against the property. That's not the choice that we like to make. We like to try and, win hearts and minds and use sort of the power of persuasion, letting people know what the risk is to their property and their investment. And hopefully we succeed that way.
Thank you so much, Chief Tubbs. We're taking your questions right now via the Q&A chat section right below our windows here. So just go to the Q&A section, ask your question or comment. We got a lot of questions coming in, or you can also go to senator.mcguire@senate.ca.gov. We're also taking your questions and comments via Facebook, whether it's on the Southern Marin Fire Protection District Facebook page, our Facebook page. Here's the next one. Chief Tubbs, Chief Weber are going to have you both comment on this. How effective and recommended are fire retardant gels that cover wooden homes? Let's go to Chief Tubbs, then we'll go to Chief Weber. Chief Tubbs.
Yeah, I guess my response to that would be what we're finding with a lot of these is it tends to be a lot of sort of snake oil type of product. We've not seen the kind of effectiveness in many of those products that we would like to see. We had a product that was recently floated by the chiefs. We're sort of trying to run that one to ground. But most of the products that we've seen don't have a super high effectiveness. The route that you want to take is removing the hazards around your house, limbing up the trees, moving the vegetation away from your home. That's where it's effective, hardening your home. But I'll let Chief Weber jump on as well.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, there is a use. We use FosCheck, which is very similar to the materials they're talking about in the firefighting application. The challenge is that this can't be replaced with good defensible space, home hardening, all these other things that we've talked about, defensible space. It may be an added component that could provide some level of protection, but once it dries, it needs to be reactivated with some kind of moisture again. And it has some effect on retarding the fire, and that's why we use it. But in place of anything else, it is snake oil. And, I think it has an application. There's insurance companies that are offering it, but I think when we have heavy fog in between these other things, and if they say they want to put it on in June and leave it till the end of the year, the effects are minimal. And I think it sets a false sense of security for a homeowner. Your embers and your eaves, dead leaves in the gutters will present, a bigger problem than anything gel will fix.
Hardening, Chief Weber, we're going to put you on the spot here. Then we're going to go to Dr. Holton. So Mark Fay asked this. Please address vegetation management, and why is vegetation management receiving more attention than home hardening? Chief Weber, County Fire.
I think that historically has been the case. And, as science has helped us make better decisions, we're learning along with all of you, and we're recognizing the importance of a house out approach. And the recent Assembly bill, I think it's 3074, was signed by the governor, talks about the importance of that first 5 feet. And we're talking about the importance of ember resistant vents on homes, proper roof choices, dual pane windows, and that is critically important along with defensible space. Now remember, what we're trying to achieve is a low level fire tolerance in our community. So that means fire could burn towards a community, drop ember showers across it, and everyone still would have a house at the end of the day. And that takes a holistic approach. So I think all emphasis, or much emphasis, was placed on vegetation management for many years. with not as much attention on the House. I think that if you ask anybody today, there should be equal attention given to both. They're both critically important.
All right, that's Chief Weber, Marin County Fire. We're now going to go to Dr. Holton from Cornell University. We're going to be talking climate change now. Doctor, a few questions. This one is coming in from Kate Smith. What should the state be focused on in terms of mitigating the acceleration of climate change? So let's pick your top 5 list, if you will. This is Dr. Holton's top 5 list of what you think the state of California should be doing to be able to mitigate the acceleration of climate change. Dr. Holton, Cornell University.
Yeah, so I assume you're talking about, in this question, how to slow down or even bend the curve.
Correct.
Climate on the planet. So the state has been an absolute leader, thanks to people like Senator McGuire, Governor Brown and his leadership, even Governor Schwarzenegger, when he established AB 32. The state has been the de facto leader of the world, really, in setting an aggressive climate agenda that grows the economy and uses a free market approach known as the cap and trade system, where total emissions are capped each year and that allowances are exchanged for emitters to decide how much carbon pollution they're going to put into the atmosphere. And then the cap is reduced over time. So we get a carbon price. That's a really great approach to catalyze innovation and make sure that we can develop pathways to carbon neutrality. So the state can continue its ambitious plans, leading the charge in things like renewable energy, which the state is doing a tremendous amount of work on. In addition, thinking about how to enhance carbon sinks. The challenge of climate has gotten so out of control that it used to be that we could just cut emissions and then we could avoid the most dangerous climate risks in our future. But now we have to pull billions and billions of tons of carbon dioxide out of the air and secure it so it no longer causes dangerous interference with climate. So, this in that arena. And I think that ultimately it's going to be about collaboration and coordination because, the state alone, again, is about 2% of global emissions. And it's going to require, collaborating internationally to make sure that we can meet the needs. But the main thing California is doing, it's setting a model that can be replicated elsewhere efficiently. And I think that's the most important thing the state needs to do is keep it really aggressive and keep on the firing lines of this challenge.
So Dr. Holton, let's talk about that cooperation and I don't want to get too political here tonight, but let's just talk about the facts. The Trump administration has pulled the United States out of the Paris Accords. There is no coordination between the United States and the rest of the world when it comes to combating climate change. What are the impacts on that? And do you believe the president when President Trump says that we're going to be going into a period of global cooling versus global warming? Talk about that coordination, number one, and address global cooling, according to President Trump.
Yeah, so first of all, the coordination needs to happen because we're talking about a global challenge. When greenhouse gases go in the air, they don't stay in your backyard. When you drive your car, they don't settle out. They settle in the entire atmosphere. And in fact, carbon dioxide has an atmospheric lifetime of over 100 years. So that means every CO2 molecule we put up today will be up there for 100 years before it's effectively taken out. And that's why the challenge is so enormous. It's just like your bathtub. You fill it up with water. You can turn the faucet off, but it takes a while for that water to drain out. That's the same thing with CO2. So when it comes to the idea that somehow we're going to experience a global cooling again, greenhouse gas emissions for the foreseeable future. My sense is, based on the scientific models, that if we do everything right moving forward and we start global coordination and we adhere to the Paris Agreement, we cut carbon pollution, we grow an economy doing it, we could start to see a reduction in the pace of global climate change by around 2050, 2040, maybe. So we're really locked into some very dangerous interferences over the next couple decades. This is why we need to mitigate locally and really take measures into our own hands because this challenge has gotten quite out of control. Now, ultimately, here's the answer. Yes, of course, the Earth will cool. The current projection is that within the next 500 plus years, we will start to experiencing a cooling trend again. Okay, so if you want to wait 500 years while the entire planet goes through catastrophe, sea levels rise to 15 feet, I mean, we lose everything. That's fine. We can wait for that cooling period, but I'm not really willing to do that. I think there's so much excitement about the solutions. We should really take this problem on and lead the world. You know, that's what the United States does. We should be a world leader in this challenge.
Senator, could I add something?
Yeah,
Would you mind? So
Go.
I think it's important to appreciate some of the intermediary steps. So when Jerry Brown was our governor, he really led the charge on creating the Under 2 MOU that were jurisdictions, not state level, but more local level, counties and provinces in countries around the world that collaborated together to take steps to reduce carbon emissions and other forms of adaptation. We now have collaboration between California, Oregon, and Washington. So I think while it's certainly true, it's a global problem, there's sort of a stair step of different actions we can take. It starts with us, and it starts with what we're doing in our localities, and then it starts with those critical partnerships of jurisdictions that are not at the global level, and they're not even at the national level, and we build up from there. And I think appreciating that may make it easier to get one's mind around the actions that we can take and the impact that we can have, and we don't need to just wait until there's a global solution, because that's very daunting given the politics involved.
Well said. Supervisor Sears represents Southern Marin County. Thank you so much, Supervisor. Really good point on that. We're going to now go to Chris Riley. He's the Emergency Services Manager for the County of Marin. Rihanna writes in on Facebook, how do people who don't have a car evacuate from fires without anyone to help them? So, Mr. Riley, what are the plans for evacuations for those who don't have a vehicle in Marin County?
Yeah, that's where knowing your neighbors comes in for one thing. That's that Chief Tubbs mentioned. You know, if you join part of a neighborhood response group, know your neighbors, find out who has a car, evacuate together. That's one possibility. Another option is, of course, always evacuate early. We always tell people. So, you know, that can mean taking a footpath. You know, there's actually some identified footpaths, I believe, in Mill Valley and other areas as a means of evacuation. So when you get that notification of us through Alert Marin, you either get together with your neighbors, get together with your friends and family, evacuate early, take the footpath down, you know, catch a bus. There's a lot of different options. The key is really plan it early, practice your evacuation, know your routes, be ready for that alert.
And we're going to go to Supervisor Sears. I want to have Supervisor Sears, Mr. Riley, comment on this. I think it would be fair to say, based off of what is learned from the 2017 fires, getting out earlier, evacuating earlier, even though it's an inconvenience, is probably the smartest approach. And I would imagine that you would also be activating Marin Transit. So, Supervisor Sears.
I was just, your ESP is really good. You're just a mind reader, Senator, because I think I did want to make sure that we mentioned Marin Transit that was staged to really help our West Marin residents in our first local fire, and was available, and it didn't end up being used, which is probably a good sign. But Marin Transit is a very important component of assisting people who need to be evacuated and are not able, for one reason or another, to do it on their own. But I do think that there's nothing that replaces the knowing your neighbors. I have neighbors in their 90s who I know who are going to need my help, and so that sort of block by block knowledge is important. But we do have the resources and incredible collaboration between our various agencies in the county to step up and help people.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Supervisor Sears. Really good point. Thank you, Mr. Riley. We're going to stick with you, and we're going to talk about livestock. Does Marin, this is coming to us from Facebook, does Marin, and thank you, Brenda, for writing in, does Marin have the capability to ensure the safety of Marin's animals, not just cats and dogs, but including goats, horses, and livestock, if evacuated? Where do we go? Mr. Riley.
Yes, we do. We have a really great partnership with Marin Humane and all of the employees there. As a matter of fact, they're pretty well known around the region and around the state, actually, for assisting other counties. Cindy from Marin Humane is one of the captains there. She has a great team. They have all the plans. They exercise it regularly. They've been up to Butte, they've been in other areas. We are very prepared in that regard. We always have a representative from Marin Humane up in our Emergency Operations Center that helps us coordinate the evacuation of large animals, every animal actually. In 2017, we actually had a separate location for evacuees and their pets in our shelter at the Marin Center. So yes, a very, very important thing to consider.
Thank you so much. That's Chris Riley, Emergency Services Manager for the County of Marin. We are bouncing back and forth from the Q&A box to the email to Facebook. We're going to take another Facebook comment. This is coming in from Michael. Why doesn't California invest in a 747 super tanker fleet if we've known this is coming? So I'll take that one. And here's the bottom line of where we're at with our aerial fleet. So CAL FIRE has the largest private firefighting air fleet in the world, bottom line. Where we're focused is this. We've just struck a deal with the United States Coast Guard. We're going to transition out 7 C-130 cargo planes, the largest cargo planes in the fleet of the Coast Guard, and transition them in to the CAL FIRE fleet. We're going to put a large bladder in the belly of these C-130 cargo planes. They will then become the largest fire bombers in the sky for CAL FIRE. In addition, we're replacing all of our Vietnam era helicopters. We're replacing 12 of them. They're literally from the Vietnam era war, and we're going to replace them with 12 night fighting Black Hawk helicopters, which are critical to the success. We're going to strategically stage these helicopters. 2 are already been put to work this year, strategically place them throughout the state. In addition, we've just hired additional 350 seasonal firefighters. We're hiring additional 174 full-time firefighters this year. We hired about 100 new full-time firefighters last year, 13 new engines, brand new bulldozer crews, teams that will be deployed across the state. So we're looking at about an enhanced budget of about $85 million this year in CAL FIRE's budget to be able to hire those full-time firefighters, the additional apparatus. And as far as the 747 super tanker, we lease that every year. We've been really successful with the super tanker, and that will continue to be evaluated. Right now, for the taxpayer bang for the buck, having that during the season, especially during critical events, will be better for taxpayers than having it 365 days a year. But based off the fire activity that we're seeing and hearing about tonight, that will always be evaluated. But we believe these 7 C-130s will be put to great use throughout the state. I'll look to Chief Tubbs, Chief Weber, if anything else that you'd like to be able to mention on aerial support. Let's go to Chief Tubbs and Chief Weber.
Yeah, maybe not so much on the aerial support, but part of the overall strategy, Senators, you were talking about, and the Assembly and Legislature was very good in providing funding for pre-positioning, something that we've been exercising with a lot of frequency. And what pre-positioning is that when we have red flag warning and we know the risks are high in certain areas, is we actually move the firefighters and those engines closer to the area where we believe that the fire may be. That way, the response time to fires that break out is much lower. It allows us to attack those fires sooner. That's a very critical tool in our arsenal.
And I think I'll just piggyback, Senator. You know, we've got CAL FIRE has the largest. It's really an air force worldwide, and a lot of times the planes can't fly because of visibility of the smoke, and that was a challenge during the last fire siege. When we can use that aircraft, we use them very effectively, and the state has a unique program with the S2s, our initial attack, quick hits. The big planes are for those larger fires and we use them all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been a real struggle for the last 3 days with the glass fire in Napa and Sonoma County. Those pilots who are flying those planes need about 5 miles of visibility. And if they don't have those 5 miles, then they simply can't fly and they actually can't hit their target. And that's been a really big challenge. Now, it's good when it's bad for our health. But when it comes to fire behavior, when you have that thick smoke, low lines, thick smoke, that means we don't have any winds. It puts a cap on that fire. The bad part is we can't get that air attack up and moving for those wildfires. So there's some give and take there. I want to go quickly. We're going to go to our lightning round here. We have about 5 more minutes. Chris Riley, you're going to kick off our lightning round. He's ready to go. So we call him Chris Lightning Riley. So this is coming in for David. From David, do you use NOAA specific area messaging encoding for fire and other emergency notifications? If not, why not? If not, when will you? Why don't you describe that that technology, please, Mr. Riley?
Yeah, great question. And that's something that we've been looking at for a while now. It's very new, but we've been working with the Weather Service to begin to test sending messages, all hazard messages, so fires, whatever that we might be facing, through weather radios. And it's a really great option because they're relatively inexpensive. They can run on a battery. So if cell towers are down, we can send messages through these weather radios. So yes, we are using that technology now. We're testing it, and we hope to use it soon.
All right, we're going to stick with Chris Riley. Second question coming in for the lightning round. This comes from the Q&A chat box from Eve. How can we be notified of fires or evacuation orders during sleep hours when one is asleep and not checking social media or alerts? How are we waking folks up, Mr. Riley?
Yeah, one great way to do it is to make our caller ID number for Alert Marin a favorite on your phone, so that it'll bypass your nighttime shutdown on your phone, on your audible warnings. That number is available on the alertmarin.org website. So make that a favorite in your phone, subscribe to Alert Marin, and you'll get the notification.
Thank you so much. A few more questions. We're going to go quickly to Chief Weber, Marin County Fire. This comes in from Brenda. When will the county look at providing a secondary route for evacuation, be it footpaths or new fire roads for people living on dead ends with only one way out in case that one way is blocked? So do you talk to neighbors about secondary evacuation routes? How does that work, Chief Weber?
So if you're on a one way in, one way out, one of the things we're investing is a 7-figure study to look at where our greatest risk threats are, one way in, one way out roads. Chris Riley was just talking about the importance of notifications. For us, it's getting you out early when we know that exists. There aren't magic roads, and the ability to create roads into the wildlands is problematic. We do not want people evacuating into the wildlands. Unpaved roads, downhill, going towards your shopping center is much safer than evacuating on a fire road. Cars become disabled, blocked, trees fall, gates are locked. You end up with significant issues. So what we want you to do is get out early, have a go bag, be prepared. When the notification is there, on paved road, out and down is the way to go.
All right, Chief Weber, we have another lightning round question for you. When will this is coming in from Christine, when will we close down Mount Tam as added fire protection to the residents?
So we do, State Parks regularly closes portions of Mount Tam, as does Marin Municipal Water District during high fire danger areas. Now, that doesn't mean they're closed to foot traffic, but that's vehicle traffic, which is a primary cause of wildland fires. So that regularly occurs now.
All right, next question, lightning round. Michael comes in. He says, Chief Weber, with so much land burned already, shouldn't that be preventative going forward? We see growth coming in about 5 years, though. So, Chief, talk to us about that.
When I talk about that fire regime, you look at a normal path of every 15 years. You look at just what's occurred in Lake County, Napa County, Sonoma County over the last 5 years. And, in Marin alone, we have 529,000 acres. So when you look at 4 million across the state, it's not as big as you think it is. And there's still a lot of room for additional burning. And when you see like the Glass Fire, it's between several other fire footprints. And, you'll have a change in fuel conditions. And in some cases, these are lower intensity fires, which are good for the landscape, but they're not always that case. And then you'll have a transition similar. I like to say the equatorial line's moving. And what Southern California saw 25 years ago, we're starting to see up here. You're seeing these fires come in, a change in the fuel type from maybe conifer fir, grassy oak woodland to brush. And that isn't necessarily a good thing because your fire regime on brush can be year after year almost, which is challenging.
That's Chief Weber, Marin County Fire. We're now going to go to Chief Tubbs from the Southern Marin Fire Protection District. This next question is coming in from Sashi. She asks, why is the amount of vegetation within 5 feet of the home important to keep our homes from igniting? So why 5 feet, Chief?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we have noticed in fire behavior is the plantings that are up close to the houses. Chief Weber has noted a lot of the structural damage or destruction comes from ember travel. And when those bushes are within 5 feet of your house, they then begin to directly impinge, whether it's through heat transfer or direct flame contact. So the farther that we move them away, we reduce the likelihood of that heat travel or flame impingement igniting your home.
Next question, Chief Tubbs. Jennifer asks, how do we get in touch with defensible space inspectors to review our property and make recommendations to harden the home? We'll go to Chief Tubbs, then Chief Weber. Chief Tubbs, quickly, please.
Yes, so you contact your local fire department. For the Southern Marin Fire District in the city of Mill Valley, you would contact us directly at our main office. You can certainly contact us off our website as well. Each community has their own defensible space inspectors, and then we would schedule that to come out and work with you.
Thank you. Chief Weber.
Very similar to Chief Tubbs' answer. In the greater Ross Valley and the county of Marin are connected. We have 20 inspectors, and reach out to your local fire agency and request that evaluation.
I'm going to go back to Chief Tubbs. A couple more questions. Sylvia says, we live in Tam Valley. Will we hear the high-low sirens?
Yes, well, actually what you'll probably hear are the parts of the LRAD system. So the city of Mill Valley installed what are called long-range acoustical devices, which provide an audible signal. In addition, can also provide that high-low signal as well. We're actually working to expand that into the district. We're going to install some beginning in the first of the year, but yes.
All right. Last question for Chief Weber. Chief Weber, a lot of questions. We're not going to be able to hit them about Mount Tam. A lot of concern about Mount Tam. I'm going to compile them into one question from Darren because they're very similar. Darren says, I've heard that Mount Tam is the highest risk in the state. True or false? Then his second part of the question. Also, the headlands are bad, right? Can we expect a catastrophic burn like Tubbs fire here?
Our large fire growth in history is usually later in the fall under east wind events, foehn wind events. They call them Santa Anas in Southern California. The foot of Mount Tam and the communities surrounding it provide significant risk, and that's where we're making significant investment. But people too often look out to the wildlands and say that's the problem, when it's their property themselves that can make the biggest difference in survivability of a wildfire. So we're working, One TAM is a great collaborative that's working on forest health amongst the public land management agencies. They have a conference tomorrow, a summit conference tomorrow, climate summit conference tomorrow, that you can tune into and find out what they're looking at. They're looking at making some investments, understanding how they can better treat the watersheds from a vegetation management perspective and forest health. But everyone needs to focus on their own property, and then collectively we can look at the bigger landscape level piece after. But getting out alive, protecting your home, and then the landscape is last. It's those are the way the priorities fall.
Thank you so much. That's Chief Weber, Marin County Fire. Doctor, we're going to be coming to you. Ben, here we go. 2 final questions. Ray says, the doctor said it's going to get worse. How do you define worse with climate change here in California?
Yeah, so worse is a kind of pejorative term, right? It's basically, it's going to get hotter, it's going to get drier, it's going to get a lot more whiplash events, atmospheric rivers, things like that. So that we are going to see happen. We're going to see sea levels continue to rise. That's going to happen.
Okay. And Doctor, when we talked earlier in the week, you said that you're seeing an expedited timeline with the conditions of climate change and fire. Go into that a little bit, and we're going to have one last question for you.
Yeah, and that's relative to a reference. So a lot of time, climate scientists, we're so worried about being wrong that we run a huge array of models and then we think about probabilities. And so oftentimes we base our projections on the median or the middle probability. And what we're finding is that actually the events are happening in the extreme climate model scenarios already. So it's not outside of our prediction, but what we're finding is that everything is happening quicker and quicker and quicker. And that means that the climate sensitivity of the atmosphere is more extreme than we anticipated.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holton. Last question for Dr. Holton. This is coming in here. Given he did not want to say his name. All right. So with regard to forest management, what proactive measures can be taken in Oregon, Washington, and California to remove the fuel? You've talked a lot about it, Dr. Holton, tonight. What say you?
I mean, all the above. I think, one area we're working is in biochar production, where you take these trees that don't have a lot of value on the market. They're oftentimes a lot of small material. You gasify it, you get energy out of it, you take that biochar, you put it into the soil, you help grow food in a more effective manner. So those are just some of the things, but we have to find ways to use this material and, be creative. Think of a business. There's going to be a lot of opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holton from Cornell. A final question here coming in for Supervisor Sears. This is coming in from Fern. Fern asks, describe the steps that the Board of Supervisors have taken about fire safety and vegetation management. What has been happening with the County Board of Supervisors?
So we've really been supporting all of the chiefs that you see here and all of our local firefighting force, and we've also been supporting what is really a tremendous collaboration between our fire agencies, Marin County Fire, and our Parks and Open Space, so that we have a focus on vegetation management in all of our departments and the work that various departments are doing. We obviously, in sort of Chris Riley's shop, we spent a lot of time thinking about and supporting evacuation shelters and what do we need to do to support folks who, last year, as everyone knows, folks were evacuated from Sonoma because of the fires down to Marin County. And that was a particularly exciting time because it was right in the middle of a power shutoff, and they came down to our evacuation center while we were still trying to get our power up. And we made it happen, and that was really a group effort. So the Board of Supervisors is very supportive of all these efforts. We're in very close contact with our fire professionals and all of our staff of our EOC. We provide funding in all ways that we possibly can. And I really want to give a shout out in particular to our firefighters and how stretched our firefighters are. And with the lengthening of our firefighting season, this is something that we really started looking at in 2017 and 2018. What was the impact on our personnel of being in those extreme situations for so long? And that's something that our Health and Human Services department is very concerned about. So I'd say we've got sort of the supervisors are, top of the pyramid of an incredible group of professionals who are really working together to address these issues the best we can.
That's Supervisor Sears representing Southern Marin County and the Board of Supervisors. We want to say thank you, all of you, for tuning in tonight. It's been a robust discussion. So many questions. We want to apologize. We literally have a few hundred questions that we weren't able to get to. We want to say thank you for your amazing interest this evening. What we're going to do is we're going to provide each of our panelists a quick 30 seconds closing comment, any issues that they need to be able to get off their chest before we adjourn tonight, and or remaining announcements about best practices to be able to stay safe. So let's start with Chris Riley, and then we're going to go to Chief Tubbs.
Thank you. And again, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to speak about these issues. Finally, I'll just reiterate, please sign up at Alert Marin, get your go bag ready, and practice your evacuation.
Mr. Riley, thank you so much. And again, I got to tell you, Chris Riley has been fantastic to work with. Supervisor Sears mentioned this just a moment ago, when there were individuals, and we're talking thousands of folks on the run from the Tubbs fire, Mr. Riley immediately leapt into action. He did it again last year at the power shutoffs with the leadership of the Board of Supervisors and Supervisor Sears. And I just want to say thank you, Mr. Riley, for your continued partnership. And we could not have done it without you, truly.
Thank you, Senator.
I'm very grateful, and I'm so sincere in that because it was very personal. So really appreciate that, sir. I would like to be able to go to Chief Tubbs, 30-second closing comment.
Yeah, Senator, thank you again for the invitation. It's just great that we had so many people in the community participate. I think this is really a symptom of the support and how important this is, and that's great. The last closing thought that I guess I would offer, because it's a question we often get, California Fire Service has the most advanced and the best mutual aid system in the world. One of the questions we get, though, is when we're sending those firefighters out, who is staying behind to take care of our homes? We always maintain home base, as we like to say, before we send those resources out. So a lot of times there are off-duty firefighters and we're cycling them through. But people should know in Marin County that your fire stations remain staffed as they normally would. It's very important.
Now, really good point, Chief Tubbs. Thank you so much and grateful for your leadership and hard work. Let's go to Chief Weber, Marin County Fire, for closing comments.
Yeah, again, we've done a lot here in this county. It started with Fire Safe Marin after the Oakland Hills fires. The Board of Supervisors supported the creation of the Mount Tamalpais Fire Crews, which are doing pre-fire work and vegetation management work when not responding to fires. Created the Lessons Learned Subcommittee after the 2017 fires and looked at what we could do. One of the deliverables from that was this Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority that our communities, all of us collectively, have made an investment in. That's a $20 million a year investment for the next 10 years on how we can take this holistic approach. For visitors tonight or viewers tonight, thank you for being here. We've collectively put all of our information on Fire Safe Marin, so you don't have to go to every fire agency's websites. They have evacuation seminar on there they held, which I think you'll find extremely valuable. Checklists of everything from what to do in an evacuation to plant lists to an array of information. So if you're going to visit any one-stop shop tonight, let's go to Fire Safe Marin, and thank you for being a part of this. Senator, Supervisor Sears, thank you both for hosting this excellent opportunity.
Chief, we love working with you and so appreciate you and Chief Tubbs for your leadership in these really tough times. Thank you so much. Very, very grateful. And please pass on our thanks to all the men and women from the Marin County Fire Service, whether it's in the Fire Protection District or with Marin County Fire. We are so appreciative. Thank you so much. We're now going to turn it over to our climate scientist of the night, Dr. Holton, to be able to provide us with some closing comments. Doctor.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, everybody. It's been a real pleasure. And, again, my heart goes out to the communities. I just want to leave with a quote. The great Nelson Mandela said, "Everything seems impossible until it's done." All right, let's not lose hope. There's a lot of room for optimism. We can solve this challenge. Our lives depend on it. But I think this could be an amazing opportunity to reinvent what the future is all about. So no time like the present. Thank you very much.
Amen. Thank you so much, Doctor. We're grateful for you joining us. Look forward to working with you in the months to come and for all of your incredible work over the many decades. We're now going to turn it over to Supervisor Sears and just say again, we are so appreciative of her service to this county. Supervisor Sears, closing comments, please.
So I think that the town hall tonight and the panel really has emphasized what I'll use the trite expression of a four-legged stool. We have all of our residents and the incredibly important role that each of our residents as individuals play in enhancing their own safety during fire danger times and fire threat times, and also sea level rise and the larger threat of climate change. We have our boots on the ground, our firefighters and our first responders who are just play a crucial role that we all rely on and also give us the leadership and the guidance that we need. We have the science professionals like Ben Holton who are, keeping our feet to the fire. Let's not use that phrase any longer, but at least keeping us, well informed about what we're facing and making sure that it's science grounded. And then we have the state leadership, Senator McGuire. We wouldn't be able to do so much of what we do and respond as well as we can in these emergency situations without the leadership and the support that you're providing to us in all ways. So thank you so much for convening this workshop and really being aware of what's important to our residents, but also for your broader leadership in Sacramento. It makes all the difference.
We love you, Kate. Thank you so much, and very grateful for all of your work and your partnership. Again, we want to say thank you to all of you who have tuned in this evening. Thank you for your questions, your comments, even your criticisms. We know that we could always do better. We want to say thank you to those who helped make tonight possible. We want to say thank you to Annabelle and Carrie. We want to say thank you to Carol Mills and Jason Lyles. We want to say thank you to Dana. They have been behind the scenes making sure that this broadcast was smooth. And if there were any challenges, they stayed behind the scenes. So I just want to say thank you to that amazing team that helped make tonight such a success. And I want to end it right here. The state of California has no other choice but to continue its bold leadership. Its bold leadership on climate, on bringing insurance reform, and ensuring that consumers have the ability to continue to access insurance even in fire-prone areas. We need to continue our continued focus on vegetation management and expand that $200 million a year that we've been putting in for vegetation management and dead and dying tree removal. You're going to see enhanced work with CAL FIRE, including beefing up their budget to be able to hire additional full-time firefighters, bringing in new engines as well as aerial support. And I want to end it right here. Thank you. Thanks for allowing us to be able to do our jobs each and every day. Are we going through one of the more challenging times in our life? Absolutely. But I got to tell you, together, we're going to work it. We're going to get through this. And we have no other choice, by the way. This broadcast is going to be available on the Southern Marin Fire Protection District's Facebook page. It will be available on our Facebook page and our website. And we look forward to working with you here in the months and years to come. Stay safe, Marin County. Thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to talking with you very soon. We're now going to be adjourning this Southern Marin Fire Preparedness and Climate Town Hall. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Good night.